I'm going to do a little background to why the Alannah Madeline Foundation exists and why we do this work, and Mandy's going to talk about this incredibly interesting piece of work we're doing on media literacy. So Alannah Madeline Foundation came out of Australia's last mass public shooting. We lost 35 people 23 years ago, including two little girls, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. The foundation's named after them. And as a result of that, we have some of the strongest gun laws in Australia. And they're very important to the vast majority of Australians. And we also have the Alannah Madeline Foundation, which has been taken to heart by our population. The Prime Minister is our patron, and we enjoy an incredibly high level of public support. The Foundation's work is absolutely predicated that violence is unacceptable and that the impact of violence in terms of trauma has a long-term impact both on the individual and on the community. We also have always focused on the impact of bullying on children because bullying is the most common form of violence that children experience. And we do that not only because we care about the individual, but because we always ask the question, what made a 23-year-old young man pick up a firearm and randomly murder 35 people? So we've always looked at the causes, not just how you stop gun violence. 10 years ago, the Foundation recognised that the risk of violence and challenges to safety of children in the community was not just about physical and face-to-face, but also digital and online. And we are a very tech-positive organisation, but we've worked very hard to develop a behaviour change process and concept and framework called eSmart, which is about responsible, safe and smart behaviour online. We have a very large footprint in Australian schools and communities. So more than 40% of Australian schools are eSmart. More than 90% of public libraries are eSmart. Every McDonald's in Australia, and increasingly sporting clubs, universities, etc. We're very proud of the fact that we are a country that encourages better, smarter, safer responsibilities online. But we also recognise that, like every country in the world, we are subject to the same campaigns around misinformation, disinformation and hatred. And that it has actually got a very personal impact on the Alannah Madeline Foundation. Because we advocate to keep our gun laws strong, we have been the target of extraordinary NRA-backed bullying, misinformation campaigns about our work. So we have experienced very much what it means to be the subject of misinformation and to undermine really important public policy projects and work. So very recently, we decided to extend the very broad suite of programs and activities that we do. We reach out to the most marginalised communities in the country. We have tools around digital citizenship that start from before children go to school all the way through high school. We do work around with Indigenous communities. We do co-creation. We do work on early years digital safety. We decided that we really had to focus on media literacy and helping our young people become good reporters, understand what it is that they're reading and learning and what they are distributing themselves and producing. So we're focusing now on how we can extend the eSmart framework, the eSmart tools, to be really focusing on digital literacy. And I'm going to pass over to Mandy.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction to the audience of the Alannah Madeline Foundation. I just wanted to share with you 2 pieces of evidence that have come out of Australia, some research that's been published recently. You can have a look at the slide yourself, but an interesting fact here is that in Australia, we found that young people actually trust their friends and parents the most when they're looking at news and information. But the question for us is that we recognise, and it's widely recognised, that it's actually the older generation that are the most prolific spreaders and posters of fake news, misinformation, disinformation. So there's a real intervention point there for us. Also, the University of Tasmania in Australia, so that's the island at the bottom of Australia where the tragedy occurred that saw the Alannah Madeline Foundation come to fruition. The teaching population was surveyed there, and they overwhelmingly said that they were confident in teaching media literacy in classrooms, but they absolutely didn't have the resources available to them to do it in a safe and curated way to be able to have those challenging conversations. So we saw it as a real challenge that we were up for. So with the helpful sponsorship of Google, what are we doing? Any project at the Alannah Madeline Foundation is evidence-based. So we work with universities across the globe, but particularly in Australia, Melbourne University, Monash, RMIT, University of Technology, and we have a really great evidence base that everything's grounded in. We then develop content, but we don't do that in isolation. In fact, for this project, we've established a media literacy advisory group, and that consists of academics, education practitioners in classrooms that can test and pilot our work and put things in front of young people so we get real-time feedback. So there's an efficacy cycle. As well as media professionals, so some of our broadcasters, ABC, Fairfax Media and the like, and other industry professionals, subject matter experts. So we've commissioned an English as a second language or dialect expert who's looking at the resource to overlay her own expertise so it increases the accessibility of what we're doing to the most vulnerable and marginalised youth in Australia. We then test our minimal viable product before we do anything. If you go into tech too fast and too soon, it's super expensive. So we're trying to get that right first. Then the technical build, the user testing, and finally our launch. When is our launch happening and what are we doing in this project? We're launching in March next year, and our vision is to build essentially, we're targeting 12 to 16-year-olds and we're trying to make them news and information literate. So what does that mean? We want them to act like world-class best reporters, to be curious, to critically think, to question what they see, read and hear. And it's so heartening to be here amongst these like-minded projects, to see that we have a common and shared vision in our approaches. What have we decided on with our media literacy advisory group? We've decided to build 8 digital modules, and these are the topic areas. So it goes from year 7 to year 10, so that's lower secondary and middle secondary school in Australia, so 12 to 16-year-olds. So they'll look at the making of media, so the shift in journalism, news and information. Fake news, 3 sides to a coin. Bursting your bubble, so that's where we get them to look at their media appetite and diet and things like filter bubbles and confirmation bias, and really introducing some of those ideas in a personalised way. So looking at how they use technology and what they're seeing in their news feeds and Instagram, Facebook, Google, YouTube. And then teaching them form. So again, it's really heartening, and especially the speakers from Stanford today, teaching young people about how is the internet constructed? What is AI doing? Is 70% or more of their content delivered to them through recommendations based on simply what they've clicked on before, seen, read or heard or liked? Then information overload. Then we're proudly working with a UK organisation here called the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, who are in the room. Seek them out, they're great. And they have a really deep understanding working in the areas of countering violent extremism and hate speech and skewed worldviews. Then democratic rights and the future of media. So what's our moonshot? I'm getting the wrap up. Our moonshot is to engage 30,000 young people next year, but do much more than that. We want to work in the Indo-Pacific region. There's lots of opportunity, and we saw that this morning. We often partner with New Zealand, and if you're in the room, come and talk to us while we're here today. One more thing, the ACCC, who are a government organisation in Australia, have recently handed down a report into digital platforms, and there is a recommendation in that report that we're excited about, that is to introduce media literacy into the curriculum in Australia. So there's a real opportunity for us. What have we learnt? Partner with people. Do it from day zero. The strength of our program is really based in bringing the best subject matter experts into the program. Every one of us has a small pot of money or a medium-sized pot of money, and to make it the impact and the reach further and greater, we're not trying to reinvent that wheel, but bring resources into our project. So we're working with the Museum of Australian Democracy, ABC Education, Walkley Award-winning journalism, which is the pinnacle of journalism in Australia. So we can pull that into the modules and resources and make it available for schools. And so if you think that you've got something that we would benefit from, this is what Lesley looks like, and you've seen my face. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you during one of the breaks.